Okay. Does anyone know the difference between these two apples? They look the same, right? Well, one could be organic and one could be genetically modified, but you would never know. Of course, when we buy organic food, they use it as an excuse to jack up the price and we think we're eating healthier. Well, chances are you've eaten a GMO. A GMO stands for a genetically modified organism. And today I'll be telling you why genetically modified food is bad for our health, our environment, and why we should advocate to support the labeling of genetically modified food. Okay, so how is it made? According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institute of Health, a genetically engineered food has had foreign genes inserted into it from other plants or animals into their genetic code. So things that are genetically modified are very common food that you eat every day: soy, corn, rice, canola, tomatoes, potatoes, cotton, papaya, peas, and dairy products. According to the Atlantic magazine in an article published last month, food manufacturers estimate that 80% of processed foods contain at least one ingredient made from GE foods. So now I'll show you a little video to help you understand more about why they're bad for us.
Genetically engineered crops in agriculture, a worldwide experiment on people, animals, and nature. Cultivation of genetically engineered crops like soy, maize, cotton, or canola have far-reaching consequences. 90% of genetically engineered crops belong to the corporate agricultural group Monsanto. The rest are owned by Syngenta, DuPont, Bayer, and others. Genetic manipulation of crops can have uncontrollable consequences. The function of genomes is only partially understood, but foreign genes are still introduced into crops. These genetically engineered crops are widely cultivated outdoors, where they cannot be controlled. Currently, 90% of GE cultivation occurs in the Americas, particularly in the USA.
Right, so like the video said, most of America heavily relies on genetically modified food to feed the country, but currently there is no law that states that genetically modified foods need to be labeled, such as you have a little sticker that says this is organic. So you would never know. So as time goes on, America is incorporating genetically modified food into the food system, and we're not even knowing it. So the public opinion currently, the Pew Initiative surveyed 1,000 people, and 46% of people opposed it. They said, do you favor or oppose genetically modified food in the food supply? And they said that they oppose it. And how likely would you be to eat them? And 54% of people said that they were unlikely to eat it, even though I bet you that each one of those people has eaten it and they didn't even know. And as far as you know, have you ever eaten it? They said no, but I bet they all have. So now I'll tell you why GMOs are a harm to our environment. So the problem with GMOs is that there's a horrible cycle that goes on. Monsanto is the corporation that holds a monopoly on the whole GMO business, and they are the same people that offer you the seeds to grow your crops. They're the same people that also offer you the pesticide that only works with that crop. So that makes a horrible cycle where the farmers are completely dependent on them. And when you use more and more pesticides, the insects become resistant and the plant itself becomes resistant. So it's this horrible cycle where you have to keep using more and more pesticides in order for that GMO to keep working. And this poisons the soil and our groundwater, therefore harming our environment. Now I'll tell you about how GMOs harm our health. Food allergies. So according to one study, a scientist made a soybean. They wanted to make it more nutritious, so they took a protein from the Brazilian nut and they inserted that genetic code into the soybean. So they thought they were doing well, but they actually just found out that by inserting that protein from the Brazilian nut into the soybean, you could cause an allergy in a human that ate the peas, the soybeans, if they had an allergy to the Brazilian nut. So you would never know if you have an allergy to peanuts and they insert it into your apples, then you would have an allergic reaction. So these things are unexpected, and there's unintended and unknown future consequences that are attached to our actions. Another study showed that they were trying to make a certain species of peas pest resistant, and they didn't know, and they did a study, and it actually caused allergies in mice. So how do we know that this will not cause harm to humans? And antibiotic resistant is kind of like what you hear for humans taking antibiotics, that if we keep taking them, they will no longer work. So what happens is I go back to that horrible cycles where you keep using more and more pesticides, and the insects eventually become accustomed to them. So you just have to keep doing more and more. More environmental damage. Well, actually, I decided to visit Monsanto's website, and their motto is a sustainable company, and the whole website tries to make you think that this is good for the environment, but actually it's not. And you have a gene transfer to non-target species. This is where you can actually harm non-target species, such as the caterpillar that's standing on the plants or crops, and if it eats it, it dies, and therefore you kill off a whole species. Less biodiversity in our environment, because you grow a certain kind of crop and you stop growing the natural crop, so it eventually gets kind of like dog eat dog in the natural world, and your soil and water gets further contaminated. So now I'm going to tell you why I want to advocate the labeling issue. Well, if you guys remember last year when we voted to inaugurate Obama again, also in California, they had the Proposition 37. It failed. 53% of Californians voted not to label GMOs. I think they were highly influenced by the advertisements, guess who paid for them? That company that I told you, Monsanto. So of course the person who owns the business wants you not to vote for it. And the food fact is that 50 countries around the world, they outlawed GMOs, where the U.S. continues to use more and more of it, because these countries recognize that there is a health and environmental damage that could happen, or we don't even require the labeling. So I want you to look at that cartoon. It says, I want you to know that genetically modified foods are completely safe to eat, and I want you to know that they pose no risk whatsoever. I also want you to know that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. Are there GMOs in these? I don't want you to know. So if there's absolutely nothing wrong, and they won't harm our environment, they won't harm our health, so why won't you just put a label and tell us what's in our food? So if the organic is labeled, why not GMO? So in conclusion, I told you why GMOs should be viewed as a bad thing. Try to buy organic if you can. They're dangerous to our health, and I want you guys to support the labeling if it does occur on the ballot again. And we should not be so dependent on them. I want to leave you guys with a quote. The other negatives that stem from GMOs is that scientists are tampering with nature by mixing genes, and no one knows what this is doing to the animals or environment. So let's not play with nature and keep things natural, and we won't reap the unintended consequences. Thank you.